Make sure your insurance doesn't come up short. Get gap cover with ALA. For more information, follow the links in the description. Hello everybody, today the Ford Mustang, an American icon, a truly legendary car that I really badly want to love. But every time I've driven one, I've come away disappointed. So, will the brand new S650 generation be any different? Find out in today's episode of JayEmm on Cars. Friends across the pond, seeing a Mustang is about as unusual as seeing the sun in the sky. But here in Britain, it's still got a little bit of exotic allure. And though for decades there were always those happy to import it and put up with the left-hand drive bit, in 2014, Ford did something rather radical. The 6th generation of Mustang landed on these shores in right-hand drive for the first time in the model's history. More than that, the entirety of the 6th generation was a really serious step forward for the Mustang brand as a whole. And you got the impression it was a real do-or-die car for Ford. It had new styling, a new engine, a new, now much fancier, fully independent rear suspension. And on paper, it's a brilliant car. But every time I tried to drive one, I failed to get on with it. The controls always felt mismatched, the weighting's never quite right. And as for the engine, well, if it was a V8, great. Everything else, forget it. But more importantly, it looked like a Mustang, it sounded like a Mustang, and it was relatively cheap too. Here in Britain, that 6th generation car was a real hit. However, after that initial burst of excitement in which people rushed to get their hands on the car that they, in some cases, had been promising themselves for decades, excitement faded fairly quickly. To the point that, when in 2023 the new 7th generation Mustang was announced, here in Britain, it went almost unnoticed. But still, a new Mustang is a big deal, and today I'm very happy to be driving this one courtesy of the lovely Morgan, who found himself with relatively little choice for what seems like a fairly simple mission. You see, he wanted himself a 4-seater manual V8 convertible. And help me out here, because I think he could be right. I don't want him to be, but he might be. Is this the last car that fits that description in Europe that you can still buy new? 15 to 20 years ago, you had a fair few choices. Audi S5, BMW M3, etc, etc. But now, even finding a V8 4-seater convertible is tricky. One with a manual? Almost impossible, I would wager. And a manual, naturally aspirated V8 convertible? This has got to be it, right? And though I'm sure there would have been plenty upset at the notion of a Mustang available with anything other than a big old V8 in it, the way the world is going means that it wasn't a certainty. Even Dodge, formerly purveyors of the most ludicrous of all engines, have now turned to electrification, hybridization, and turbos. Although happily General Motors have gone almost the other way, building now the wildest powertrains in their history for the new C8 generation Corvette. And most interestingly, here in Europe, the 4th generation 5-litre Coyote engine is now the only one that you can actually have in your Mustang. The 2.3-litre 4-cylinder turbo EcoBoost is still available, but not here. And that's not the only element carried over from the old car. Allegedly, the underpinnings of this are very close to that of the old S550 generation, albeit with a brand new exterior and heavily revised interior. And on the outside, I'm not exactly sure I like what they've done. I don't dislike it as a whole, but I also don't think it really screams Mustang to me anymore. It likely doesn't help that this with the convertible roof has lost some of that classic side profile, but even so, a Mustang should be instantly recognisable from the front, and this one, I just don't think it is. Inside, it's then a little bit of a step up over the old car, though, as is ever the case with American cars, it's just not quite as good as the European competition. And after even a short while with the car, you do notice a few issues with regards to build quality. First off, when you close the door, the whole card moves a disconcerting amount. Secondly, up here, there is what looks like a really weird patch over one of the seams in the body, and it looks like somebody's really made a mess of something and then tried to fix it but made the situation worse. I'm not really sure what's going on there. This side is absolutely fine. That side looks like a mess. And Morgan told me he's already had to have warranty work done on this car, in spite of the fact he picked it up only about 9 months ago, because when he went to go and fix his child's ISOFIX seat in the back of it, he noticed that the ISOFIX points and the gap for them in the bench were misaligned. As is the case with most modern vehicles, in here you now have a fully digital display, which actually works all right. And I quite like the fact that you can choose some classic looking dials for your Mustang too. The seats are pretty comfortable. There's an okay amount of space in the car, never really quite as much as you expect, but even with the convertible roof, there's still a good amount of room in the boot. The seats are also electric with both heating and ventilation, the latter of which is keeping me somewhat sane today. It's not the best I've experienced, but it's also far from the worst. What is frustrating is the amount of scuttle shake the car seems to be experiencing. That camera over there is moving around a heck of a lot more than it really should. So, sorry about that. I'm doing 25 mile an hour here on a very nice, flat and well-paved piece of road, and the camera is doing that, which is not a good sign. Now, Morgan, like myself, has always wanted to buy a car from new. And frustratingly, though you can specify and configure a Mustang on the UK website, they don't actually build them to order. Instead, you have to go to your dealer and hope they've got something in stock that's kind of like the car you wanted. Being a sucker for yellow, and this being a 1 year only colour, yellow splash in case you were wondering, he saw his opportunity and rang around every dealer he could find until he came across this. What is to him, more or less, the perfect car. In terms of options, there isn't really much. Though in America, you have a few choices for your interior, here you don't. So it's the fairly plain black. Not ideal on a sunny day like today. It also has the Magnaride adaptive dampers and red brake calipers. Beyond that, most of the stuff in here is standard. And that includes now 458 horsepower and 397 pounds-feet of American muscle. Does it do the job? Let's find out. Curious beastie this, and I have to say, not quite like any other Mustang that I've driven. And before my American friends hit the comment section, no, I did not get my specs wrong. You see, unfortunately, the days of Europeans having the more powerful cars, they are behind us, at least for American-built stuff anyway. Not that Ford builds all of its cars in America. In the States, the 5-litre Coyote in the GT, what we have here, makes 480 horsepower. The slightly spicier Dark Horse, then 500. And it comes with a slightly more interesting setup for the brakes, the suspension and so on. Here, you get only about another 8 horsepower. Torque also in the USA is about 5% higher, but if that's the price of being able to have a naturally aspirated manual V8, it's one I'm willing to pay. And in terms of the chassis, though I was very, very worried about the rigidity of this thing, because my camera doth protest at very low speeds, when you go a little bit quicker, it just doesn't really get any worse. And I've got to say, I found a groove in this car, which I haven't in many other Mustangs. Pedals here do not feel as mismatched as they previously did. The clutch is actually quite nice, brake reasonably responsive, and the throttle's pretty good too. I'd like them all a little weightier, but you know what, for day-to-day usage, it's fine. Oh, and there's a really weird handbrake in here. It's not actually a proper handbrake, it's electric. They've just made it look like a proper one. Although, that's not to say that it's perfect, because it certainly isn't. Let's start by talking about the now obligatory driving modes. You got a whole bunch of them in here. Normal, sport, track, drag strip, slippery road, and custom. All presented to you with some lovely graphics on this screen, which apparently is powered by Unreal Engine. Thing is, there doesn't seem to be a massive difference between the settings. Sport seems to be maybe the best balance for fun driving, though it does make the throttle overly sensitive. The biggest issue I have is with the custom mode, because it has to be the most useless implementation of custom I've ever seen. You see, what you have to do is choose a base mode for it, which is fine, but that then limits your choices for most of the other attributes, thereby rendering custom almost entirely redundant. And let's face it, what most people want is, say, sport traction control, sport or maybe normal for the throttle. Track apparently also gives you a linear throttle response, which is what you want, and then either normal or light for the steering, but you do want the soft dampers. You just can't program that in this. Daft. Alright, patent pending, 3-point turn hill start torture test. How does the Mustang do? The turning circle is not great. Getting into reverse is actually pretty easy. Oh, and let's talk gearboxes, shall we? Naturally roof down, visibility is superb. There we go. You can see lots of that lovely big bonnet. Yeah, gearbox. This is the petrol head friendly 6-speed manual. You could also have, and apparently very good, but I never tried it, 10-speed automatic. The really confusing bit is if you go for the dark horse, you can also have the 6-speed manual, but it's a completely different gearbox. This is made by Getrag, that's made by Tremec, and so they come with different ratios. This one, it has to be said, is geared quite long, but even so, the engine pulls quite nicely from low down, revs beautifully too. It's definitely got a more European character than the old Chevy small block ever did. However, it does feel like grip is not quite as good as I'd like it to be. The car's got pretty big boots on it, 255 at the front, 275 at the back, wrapped around 19-inch rims, meaning you've still got quite a bit of sidewall. They're P0s, obviously nice, new and fresh. The car's only got just over 1,000 miles on it. However, on the exit of a bend, I can feel the thing pulling the power in when it really shouldn't be, considering it's 32 degrees today. For my American friends, that's about 210 Fahrenheit or gas mark 6. The steering too. Doesn't really matter which mode you're in. It's got a nice weighting to it, but there's very little to no response in it. The front end doesn't really feel that keen. There's a real moment while it tries to work out what exactly it is that it wants to do. However, you do eventually work out what it wants to do and when it wants to do it, and so you just drive it at its pace. This just doesn't feel like something I want to really throw into a bend, because I'm not entirely sure it'll cooperate. Actually, there, it's trying to fight me too. This car's got all the obligatory ADAS systems and everything. Lane keep is a little bit intrusive. Wind noise in here, roof down, as you can probably hear, it's actually pretty good. What's it like with the windows down? It's actually quite pleasant, that. Lovely way to get about. Now, like just about everything over the last 5 years, the price of the Mustang has risen, although I think Ford have done a fairly good job at keeping it under control. However, there's something very important to point out, because if you were to go to the Ford USA website, you'd see that the starting price of a Mustang was around $32,000, which at current rates is something like £27,000. That's nothing. However, that is the price for the base car with the base engine, no options, and also likely no tax either. Here in Britain, all of the cars are fairly well optioned, meaning you've got that 5 litre as your default and only engine choice. You've also got a few of the packages as standard, and so what you have here as the base model in the USA would be a relatively well specified one. But that also means that here they start at £58,000. This one had a list price of about £62,000. There's a big part of me as well that really wants to complain about the fact that this just doesn't make a Mustang I noise anymore. But the simple fact is, with all of the European regulations now in place, Ford didn't really have much in the way of a choice. I'm certain there could have been something they could have done to make it sound a little bit better, but in all honesty, it's a Mustang. The chance of something like this having an aftermarket exhaust on it in a few years is fairly high, and you can still hear it and enjoy it. So you know what, on that front, I'm going to give it a pass. I tell you what, I'm in sport mode, and even though the traction control light wasn't flashing up there, either this just doesn't have the grunt it really should, or it's really pulling back in second, because it should have been a lot quicker than that. Let's try first and see what happens. Yeah, it's these long gears. That's not helping. Nor, I suspect, is the curb weight. Here, 1,850 kilos. But, you know what? A few days ago I was driving an E92 generation BMW M3, a mighty car, and on paper a very similar one to this, just about a decade and a half older. And for most people in Britain, I think that's probably the better car to go with. However, if you have to have something new, and if you want your car in meat and potatoes guise, do you know what? It's not terrible, this. I'm getting on with it better than any other Mustang I have driven. The main complaint I have is the looks. The front end is just a bit generic, and that rear, what were they doing? Why have they folded the boot lid? It looks like Pac-Man in this colour. It's just not right. Ford also apparently have not been very good with parts supply or anything else, and they're not as easy to deal with as they should be for a company so large. That's unfortunate.
Likewise, the suspension. In spite of the adaptive dampers and all of the acronyms Ford could throw at it, it just felt a little bit cheap. The whole thing was unresolved all the time. After I finished filming, I put a few more miles on the car, and no matter what mode you were in, it just never really felt right. And for a car they've been working on for so long and building for decades and decades, to have still not cracked that is very disappointing, particularly as this is a company now more focused than ever before on exporting their cars. They really do need to make them work better on our roads. Funny thing is, having driven many over in California, theirs I think are even worse. Ford, there's no excuse.
However, in 2025, the fact that you can walk into your Ford dealer and buy yourself a brand new right-hand drive Mustang with a 5-litre naturally aspirated V8, that is something worth celebrating. And it's likely the most rounded the car has ever been. It's easy for us to think this is some sort of proper exotic muscle car, but to the Americans, I just don't think that's what it is, nor has it really ever been. And so long as you're able to see that, I think it's a car worth trying. Anyway, I want to say a big thank you to Morgan for bringing it out, and as ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.